Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into a topic today that seems like it's just everywhere you look. Cancel culture.
Yeah, it really does feel like everyone's talking about it these days.
You all have sent us tons of articles on this, so we know you're really eager to kind of get a grip on, what it is exactly, what it isn't, and what it means for us.
I think it's a term that brings up a lot of really strong feelings from people, and we hope to kind of unpack all that.
For sure. And we're not shying away from any of the more complex aspects of this topic. So we're going to be looking at a lot of different angles, like how cancel culture connects to social justice, how it might be impacting free speech, and would you believe it, we're even going to touch on how it could play a role in the upcoming U.S. presidential election.
Yeah, the election, it really makes you think, how is all this stuff connected? We're going to try to look at some of those connections today, like how social trends and maybe even psychology plays into this whole thing.
Okay, so let's just get right into it then. When people say cancel culture, what are they even talking about? Is there like a single definition that everyone agrees on?
That's a really good question to start with, and the short answer is no, not really. I mean, the term itself is something that people debate about all the time. There are people who definitely see it as a way to hold people accountable for doing bad stuff, like a demand for consequences for harmful behavior.
So kind of like a digital boycott.
Exactly. Like if a company does something unethical, people boycott them. This is kind of like that, just online.
But then on the other hand, you have people who see it as censorship, a way to shut down conversations and prevent people from speaking their minds.
Yeah, and that's the other side of the coin. Critics of cancel culture worry that it's creating this climate where people are afraid to speak up because they don't want to be publicly shamed or ostracized, and they see that as a threat to free speech and open dialogue, which are really important values.
It does seem like a really tricky thing to balance, right? Like, how do we hold people accountable for their actions, but also protect everyone's right to free speech? Can we even do both?
It's a huge question, and to be honest, it's one that we will keep coming back to throughout this whole deep dive. It's tough, but I think to really understand what's going on here, it's helpful to look at what's actually happening.
You mean like real world examples?
Exactly. Like cases where people are saying cancel culture is happening and it's causing these huge debates, both good and bad.
Okay, I'm with you. So, what are some times where cancel culture has become this really big debate?
So, one that comes to mind is the comedian Louis C.K. Remember how his career basically imploded after he admitted to and apologized for the sexual misconduct allegation?
Right.
That whole situation brought up a lot of discussion about power dynamics, especially in comedy and entertainment, and whether these kinds of social consequences can actually be a form of justice,
No.
especially when the legal system doesn't really address the harm that was caused.
Yeah, that is a really complicated situation, and there are so many different sides to it. It also feels like social media has really changed the game, hasn't it?
For sure. I mean, think about it. Platforms like X, Twitter, they can turn into these echo chambers that just make things so much more
Yeah. Yeah,
intense.
they can be brutal.
It's like it's already hard to have nuanced conversations online, but those platforms make it so much harder because they amplify the outrage so much.
So social media is adding fuel to the fire,
Hmm.
but is it really the cause of cancel culture? Or is it more like just a reflection of what's already going on in society?
It's probably a little of both, if we're being honest. Social media has definitely changed things. There's no doubt about that. It lets people mobilize really quickly and spread information faster than ever before, which is a good and a bad thing, right?
Right.
But people have always had strong feelings about social issues and wanted to hold others accountable for their actions way before Twitter was around.
True. And I think it's really easy to forget that there are real people who are affected by all of this online stuff. So I guess my question is, what kind of impact does cancel culture have on these people, both the people being canceled and the people doing the canceling?
There's been research on this, on online shaming and public criticism, and it probably won't surprise you. It can be really damaging to be on the receiving end of that kind of attention. We're talking like serious emotional distress, damage to your reputation, and even difficulty finding work.
Wow. So even if someone's intentions are good, even if they're trying to hold someone accountable for something bad, there can still be a real human cost to that.
Absolutely. And that just shows how complex this issue is. There are no easy answers. And it really makes us ask ourselves, can we have accountability without forgetting about compassion?
Such a tough question. I want to go back for a second to something you said earlier about cancel culture and the election. Are you saying that these online fights are actually a sign of something bigger happening in society?
That's exactly what I'm thinking. So Pew Research actually did this study on what likely Kamala Harris and Donald Trump supporters value politically, and what they found is fascinating.
What they find?
Well, they found that the two groups were totally divided, not just on policies, which you would expect, but on really fundamental values. Like their cultural attitudes were completely different, even their ideas about what it means to be an American.
That's kind of scary, honestly. So we're saying that people basically see the world in completely different ways and can't agree on what it means to be a good person or a good citizen.
Yeah, it's a lot. And what's even crazier is how that connects back to cancel culture. What I'm seeing is that these online fights aren't just random isolated things. They're part of this much bigger trend where society and politics are becoming more and more fragmented.
Meaning what?
Meaning people are retreating into their own little ideological corners, and anyone who disagrees with them is the enemy.
So basically, it's like cancel culture is just one of the ways this big societal split is showing up, right?
Yeah, you could say that.
Hmm.
And one of the biggest things that gets lost in all this division is actual conversation, like real dialogue.
Because everyone's so busy trying to cancel each other.
It's more like instead of actually engaging with what the other person is saying, we just attack them personally. You know, like those ad hominem attacks you see everywhere.
Oh, totally. It's like those comment sections where it's just a bunch of insults instead of like actual arguments.
Exactly. And that's where critical thinking comes in, which is something we talk about a lot on this show.
Yeah, critical thinking, it's about not just reacting emotionally, right? It's about actually stopping and thinking about the information, looking at it from different angles, all that good stuff.
Right. It's about having strong opinions, but also being able to back those opinions up, thinking about other points of view, and just acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, you don't have all the answers.
Which honestly can be really tough to do,
Yeah.
especially like online when everyone's fired up about something.
Oh, for sure. It's a skill, and like any skill, it takes practice. And there's actually some interesting research out of Harvard Kennedy School on how we can actually get better at teaching and learning critical thinking.
Okay, so you're telling me there's hope. Tell me they found the secret formula.
Well, not exactly a magic formula, but they did find that it's not enough to just teach the concept of critical thinking in a vacuum. Like
Yeah.
just memorizing definitions and stuff.
Got it.
It's more about giving people actual chances to use those skills in real life situations and then giving them feedback on how they're doing.
So less theory, more practice.
Exactly. Makes sense.
Totally.
And when you think about all those online arguments and debates, it makes perfect sense.
Oh, totally. Because if we actually took the time to understand those critical thinking skills, we could avoid so many of those pointless arguments, or at least make them a little more productive.
Right. Instead of just reacting emotionally or going straight to personal attacks, we can hit pause for a second, look at the information, try to understand different points of view, the whole 9 yards.
I mean, it makes sense when you say it like that,
Yeah.
but the internet is like designed to make us react quickly without thinking, right?
Yeah, it can feel that way sometimes, but there are people and organizations out there trying to change that. Harvard Law School is doing some really interesting work in this area.
Wait, really? Harvard Law? I thought they were all about, like, debating legal cases, not cancel culture.
Right, but they've created these spaces where people can have, like, real conversations about controversial topics, even the really tough ones.
Interesting. So instead of just trying to win an argument, they're actually trying to understand each other.
Yeah, they really emphasize things like really listening to each other, empathy, and trying to find common ground, even if they don't agree in the end.
So basically, it's more about learning from each other than proving each other wrong.
Exactly. And will everyone agree on everything all the time? Probably not. But it's definitely a step in a more positive direction, away from all the outrage and silencing that we see online. It's about remembering that even when we disagree, we can still learn something.
It's about changing the goal. Like, the goal isn't to win the argument, it's to have a real conversation.
100%.
So we should be thinking about how we talk to people online the same way we talk to people face to face, like more politely.
It's more about, like, the thoughtfulness.
Okay, I get it. But that's really hard to do, isn't it?
It's definitely a different way of thinking about things, but it could make a huge difference, don't you think?
Totally. So where do we even go from here? We've talked about so much, like what cancel culture is, how it plays out in the real world, the whole critical thinking thing. It's a lot. What does this all mean for the people listening, the ones who are dealing with this every day?
I think the biggest takeaway is that cancel culture isn't just some abstract idea. It's something that we're all part of, whether we realize it or not, and it's shaping us just as much as we're shaping it.
So no easy answers then.
Nope, sorry to say. But that doesn't mean we can't do anything. We can still make choices by ourselves and together to make the internet a better place.
Okay, I like the sound of that. So how do we do that? What can we actually do?
Well, first things first, we got to be more self-aware. Like really ask ourselves, what are my biases? Am I really open to hearing different perspectives, or am I just trying to protect my own ego?
It's like they say, be the change you want to see in the world, but for the internet.
Right. Exactly. And it's not all on us as individuals. We can also encourage each other to have better conversations online.
What do you mean?
Like if you see someone being hateful or just saying stuff that isn't productive, call them out. Or if you see someone getting talked over or ignored, amplify their voice. Even just disengaging from conversations that are clearly going nowhere can be helpful.
You're saying that we all have a responsibility to make the internet a better place. It's not just on the big companies or whoever's the loudest. It's on all of us.
100%. And in the end, that's what's going to determine the future of cancel culture.
Mm-hmm.
Are we willing to talk to each other even when we disagree? Are we willing to listen and try to understand where the other person is coming from?
Those are some really important questions for all of us to be asking ourselves.
They really are.
So to everyone listening, next time you're about to send that really angry tweet or jump into a comment section war zone, take a deep breath and remember what we talked about today. Ask yourself, how can I be a part of making the internet a better, kinder place?
That's the goal.
Because even if it's just a small thing, it all adds up.
It really does.
Well, that's about all the time we have for today. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions and keep diving deep.
See you next time.